welcome to this session, and thank you for accepting our invitation. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Rudy. And hello, everyone. It's so nice to see so many faces here. I look forward to speak about this topic and share what I've been passionate about for the past 8 or 9 years. And maybe before I start the slides, a little bit about my background. I've been an entrepreneur for quite a while. I've been through the Silicon Valley engine, created the company, and ultimately sold that to Amazon. And so I've seen that side of the world, and I realized that there is something that those incentive systems do not provide that we need in order to create the world that I think we all seek. And so over the past 8 or 9 years, I've been looking at the topic of sovereignty, because I do believe that as people, our natural state is not war, as Hobbes says, but it's community. And I think that over the past 200 years or so, we've lost a lot of the skills that enables us to live in community and govern together and govern ourselves. We've become so dependent rather than interdependent on each other. And one thing that I've learned about AI is that it will essentially perpetuate, all the biases and all the behaviors and belief systems that are already around, and just accelerate those. And so ultimately, the solution for regeneration will be very similar to the solution for AI when it comes to the human dimension, which is how we connect with each other and how we govern ourselves, and those things that we use as tools, right? Because I think that's a main distinction to make here, that AI is a tool, an extension of ourselves, an augmentation, not something to replace us. Although that's what we see in the movies a lot. So with that, I'll start the presentation. Can everyone see my screen? Perfect. Great. So I'll walk through this guide, if you will, and share some of the thinking that arised over the past 8 years or so, working towards these solutions and failing a lot and learning from that, and seeing what actually is needed. Especially around the unintended consequences that we might already see arise from these large language models today. Um, and I want us to focus a little bit on this paradox, right, where we have more and more data available, both as humans as well as these AIs. But ultimately, what we're getting is cognitive overload. Right? We are not able to process all of that data, and our decision making is actually degrading. We're not able to see the forest for the trees, and often we're not even able to understand what is true anymore in this world, who to trust, or what to base our decisions on. And this is increasingly made difficult with AI that's very convincing in both the answers that they are giving, as well as, of course, the ability to actually mimic real people in situations that we probably have seen in the news as well. So how do we create a situation where we have more trust as at the cornerstone? Because without that, this problem will only get worse. And of course, this started with social media, but now it's so pervasive. We see it in many other places as well, um, where actually the intermediation of the human connection is causing isolation. And this intermediation has already been happening for a long time, not just in the AI world, but if we look at how supermarkets intermediate our relationship with living systems, right, with the so-called natural world, we see this is essentially just a continuation of that same problem. Our worlds are relational, but that is not how the current AI systems are created. And that, of course, really helps with the centralization of power. And that's what we're seeing here. It's a step to massive centralization of power in the ways that the artificial intelligence is created today. And part of that are these algorithmic bubbles, the inability to choose which algorithm is sorting the information for you. It is not your friend, it's not working for you. And what would the world look like if it would be working for us? And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But this is, of course, driving the polarization because the the intentions rather behind these algorithms are one of extraction, and division is helping with that. It is the opposite of allowing us to cooperate and to self-govern, right, which is what sovereignty is. So we'll talk a little bit about AI quality, the components of regenerative AI, some of the solutions, such as a data wallet and a web of trust, and some example use cases and how you can adopt this depending on where you are in the field. So the start of a solution, as we're all thinking about this, is data quality. It's great that these big models are trained for a lot of money by these big tech companies. However, our most precious data is our personal data. It's the data that we collect, it's the data that trusted institutions collect. And why? Well, first and foremost, because we can actually trust that information. But if we can distinguish between trusted information and maybe not so trustworthy information or fake information, we get a 1984 scenario. And one could argue that we're already there. And so having that trust component there, having access to a highly diverse set of information rather than what's out there on the internet is a part of the solution. And we also need to look at biases. I forget the exact statistics, but something like 4% of data from the African continent is included in the LLMs or something like that, at least very small. So we're talking about huge biases, and even within the North Americans and European context, there is a lot of bias there. And again, diversity can help with this if we get trusted organizations to create those models and collect that data. And we need human oversight, right? Who decides? Who decides? This is a big question, a big topic when it comes to this data. Who decides what data is included and what not? What a model can say and what it can't. Right now, we see it's highly politicalized. Right? In China, the model can talk about certain things. In the US, the model can talk about other things. Who decides, and how does it benefit us, or who is it benefiting? These are things we should really think about. And so the questions here, is the data diverse enough, right? Does it represent that full spectrum of human experience and knowledge? From the nitty-gritty material to the spiritual and everything in between, from all sides of the spectrum and in between, and whose values are encoded. We say all models are political. And so that means that a model does include values of some kind. Well, which ones are those, and how do you know? And these are important questions to think about. And the humans that provide oversight obviously will project their values on the model. So do you have the freedom to choose a model, and do you know the values with which it has been trained? How is that trust established? These are questions that help really thinking about who to trust, what data to depend on, or what model to depend on when it's trained on that data. So we are already seeing this happening, right? I made this presentation a couple of months ago, and now it's even more prevalent how AI is really shaping the world, and it's especially how we perceive the world, right? What is our perspective? It is now funneled through so much AI that it's that AI that determines what we see and what we believe. in many ways, critical thinking is become harder because now we can just ask a question to ChatGPT and we think that that's critical thinking. And then, of course, there's the relationships itself. Like, what does it mean to have a relationship with a platform that shows a picture of a human versus actually having a relationship with that human? And how can AI either help create a real deep connection or deter from that? And so this is way beyond privacy. 9 years ago, when I started in this space, we thought, okay, privacy is the main thing, but this is really about sovereignty, not just controlling who gets your data and what they can do with that, but having the ability to do with the data what you want and to share the data with who you want to share this with and maybe collectively do something with that data. And that's far more important than just the privacy aspect. So when I think about regenerative, I think about returning to our blueprint as a species. I really love this book, Total Reset by Greg Campbell. He studied for 35 years with the Aboriginals from Australia. And from that, he created or distilled rather a blueprint of living for humanity. And I think that shows what our natural state is, but it's these incentive systems that move us away from that. And these are just a couple of principles that he outlines, really, really deep principles. But I think these four are really, really easy to grasp and understand. Right? Diversity is life. We need diversity to deal with a fast-changing, fluctuating world that we live in, and we should design systems to enable that. Especially when we think about AI, there's so much that we can do rather than erode all the cultural diversity. We can actually encode that and create more diversity. And life is regenerative. So how can we use these AI systems to actually create more life? Um, so these obviously create then regenerative outcomes, right? We can architect AI to heal ourselves, and it was very interesting to hear the conversation and see how many people are already using AI to introspect and look at themselves. Can we do the same for the natural systems, the living systems that we're a part of? And can we understand them more deeply so that we know how to care for them better? Um, and how can we create technology that enhances our abilities? And we all, I think, lost something when we started depending on Google Maps, right? And part of our brain probably atrophied a little bit when it came to navigating. So how can we prevent AI from atrophying the things that we really want and need as humans, and can use it to enhance those parts of our humanity, and who decides that? So these are the four components: model diversity, self-collected data, so data that you or people that you trust collect in a group and use that to train models. We believe that the future is a place where there are millions of models that are highly diverse and where we can understand the trust and the values that went in there because we have the trust connections with the people that trained them, where we have collective governance around these models, because ultimately the AI alignment problem is not a purely technical problem to solve. It's way more a social problem. How do we organize ourselves to create the trust to have highly trusted data that we can then use for the models that perform a certain role and function? And universal accessibility, being able to do this without a lot of technical skills. And we're already seeing this in the world of coding happening, where it becomes easier and easier to become a better coder, to code faster. And how can we create a place where we can collect data and build these models without having that technical hurdle to pass? Part of the solution that is being worked on today is this idea of a data wallet, a place where, as a non-technical user, person, being, doesn't even have to be a human being, you can own and control your data. It can be a human, it can be a farm, a tree, a community. Each can have a data wallet where they store their data And it can be in the cloud, it can be on the phone, it can be in many different places, but it's secure, it's encrypted, it is yours. All your data gets imported, your emails, your messaging, your health data, banking data, whatever data you have, and it can be interrelated and correlated such that you can make better use of it with models, AI models that you trust, that you can choose, that work on that data where it's local first. So even if you're not online, you can still access it and you can have it serve you. And the other big part of the solution, as we see it, as I see it, is this idea of a web of trust. Because how do I know who to trust? Well, if I trust a couple of people and they trust a couple of people and they trust another couple of people again, we create this network. Where the trust factor of the network allows us to understand which parties we can trust by knowing who trusts who. And with that, we can start building identity and co-creating. And as we build more identities, we can build more trust within the community. And therefore, those that choose then to work together on a model can show to the world why they are trustworthy. And this is essential infrastructure of a trustful internet that we see underlies what is necessary for AI to be aligned with human interest. And the third piece is collective governance. When we think about governance, we may think about government. We think about top-down control and these type of things. But I invite you to think about governance as a way to have your voice heard, to have all voices heard, maybe to have those minority voices heard that hold specific keys to solutions that we don't know because we haven't listened. Governance, I think, is mostly about deep listening to each other and coming to an agreement with each other rather than fighting each other about who's right. And it starts with the individual sovereignty, the ability to govern yourself and really listening to your heart and your gut and being able to do those things that are in your best interest and of your community and of the next generations and expanding that to the community and then making sure that everyone can benefit from those decisions and where there's a transparent process where with clear rules that we can all see and verify. And I guess to link this to AI specifically, imagine that we come together as a group that has a unique data set, whether or not it's about living systems or it's about our own body. Maybe it's a health issue or something like that. And we come together, we pull that data, and together we govern that data as an asset where we train a model to maybe early detection for that issue, or maybe helping others overcome instability in a regenerative farm, something like that. And we can share that model to others, and they know that they can trust us and that we won't um, deviate them from the solution because they can see who we are, even pseudonymously, right? Even without knowing our name or where we live, etc. And then with technology, we can confidentially process that information so that we do have that privacy. Right? We create a model on the data that learns, but it doesn't reproduce our private information. So it is able to fine tune on the task, securely execute, so we can give that to others without exposing ourselves. And I already mentioned health and well-being, right? Your body. How can we use these models to actually go much deeper? Once I have a data wallet with all my information, now I can actually know myself much more deeply. And it would be data that I wouldn't give out to maybe a Google or any of these other big tech companies because of a lack of trust. But when I own it, I can have models that can go really deeply and that have been trained on similar data of others for early detection, for behavioral change, as we spoke about before, with that privacy. Personal assistant becomes actually usable. We all saw the movie Her, of course, but who wants a Her that's continuously monitored by big tech companies? But with this type of solution, we can get that those abilities and know that we are the only ones that can access that information. It's not leaking to anyone else. And my favorite is regenerative farming. There's so many hurdles right now. Right? Regenerative farming is less than 1% of the farming practices in the world. We need to get that to double-digit percentages, and this is mostly an information problem, an education problem. How do we get people to actually know what to do and how to effectively plant the different species together to get the benefits from regenerative agriculture? And that's where AI can really help. And there's so many ways that it can go wrong, but if we train the right models, we can help farmers in a very cost-effective way to transition to regenerative agriculture. Um, Nature on the board. This is, one of the things that have been mentioned a lot, but now we can actually put a specific piece of nature on the board rather than somebody that holistically says, "Oh, nature." No, you can put actually information about a certain river, or a forest, or a certain biodiversity in a place on the board of an organization as they make decisions on what they might want to do. And this is, of course, when that river or forest, etc., has their own data wallet with data. So in closing, how to adopt regenerative AI, I think it's important that we start building around data wallets and enable these data collectives as a way to access models, reward the data contribution, and with that gain much better results. So all AI is political, diversity of models is essential, and data sovereignty for everyone is key. I'm working on Alilo, which is an ecosystem fund, an incubator for what we call networked adaptive organisms. And our first networked adaptive organism is around digital sovereignty. Masterminding Union is an amazing project to bring together change makers to build a blueprint for scalable, regenerative, resilient cities. And Hard Masters, I can only recommend, is an amazing conference and retreat for business people really getting to their heart, organized by Janai, the former partner of Rudy. And that's it for my presentation.